First question. How long would you imagine to set up a resource-based economy?
Go ahead. Mic on? Mic.
Test, test, test. How long will it take to get the microphone to work? Hello, hello. There we go. All right. Well, is that a loaded question? Of course, we're talking about changing the planet. So to throw a time scale on it is erroneous, I think, on its face. But I look at it this way. I don't expect to see this happen in my lifetime. And I'm doing that to myself on purpose. All right? Think about it. If you're doing this for the selfish reason of I want it for me, why are you doing it? I'm doing it probably knowing that I'm not going to see it happen in my lifetime, and I'm doing it anyway.
I would just add to that there is a value shift that can happen in more of a step-by-step sense. Obviously, the definition of a resource-based economy, and as what Eva said earlier, that we're always in transition. So planting the seeds of these values, which we're seeing anyway, almost forced by the environment, such as this kind of greenwash thing we see in corporate America right now, at least it's a positive notion, even though they don't really understand what they're up against, and the public doesn't understand that you really can't have a green corporation because it goes against the very fundamental laws of the market economy. So there is a step-by-step concept that people should keep in mind, and there really is no final end. We can achieve a certain percentage of this in a certain abstract sense. Global unity, obviously, in its final state of optimization, when the world is working together in a systems approach, would be the final definition of it, though.
I was only going to add one thing very quickly, which is that imagine you're in the 1980s. Well, briefly, it's awful. Anybody here think that you would have had Occupy in the 80s? Or things like Kickstarter and all the rest of it in the 1980s? Or all of the sort of tiny little, the eco-farming thing, the spread of new technologies, things like 3D printing. I spent a lot of time on aeroplanes, and Lufthansa's main article in their January issue was 2013, the year of the 3D printer. This is actually a night and day difference from prior ages. It doesn't feel that way because you got used to it really quickly. So we're already on our way there, and we have a trouble seeing that, I think, sometimes. So let's not finish, but we should applaud already some of the moves that have been made that are in line with a more sustainable sort of system.
I like to remind people, because this is really a transition question, that the current capitalist market system didn't start at like 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. So we need to start asking ourselves, well, when people ask me, what does a transition look like? My response is, well, look around. What does it look like to you? You're in it. This is it. People talking about these ideas is part of the transition. And I like in Eva's presentation when she talked about how even 40% of the way there, even though it may not have every single thing in place, we need to recognize the distance that we've come and what we've come from and what we're working towards. So it is a work in progress.
Just add something very quick to quantify things a little bit. There's an interesting social science study that came out, I believe I saw it first on zeitnews.org, that found that when a particular idea was adopted by about 10% of the population, that was often was often the threshold or the tipping point for it to become adopted by the majority or by a large group of people. So perhaps that's the critical mass that we're talking about, that we have to reach and get to embrace the ideas that we're advocating. Anyone else? Next question, I guess.
Okay, next question. In an era with no police, state, how do we fight crimes of passion such as rape, domestic abuse, etc.?
Matt?
Where do we start here? I mean, first of all, we should point out that 95 to 99% of most crime exists as a direct result of the pressures induced by the monetary system. And probably the rest could be said to indirectly be related. Remember, there's always a behavioral chain of causality that needs to be understood. Just because we can't understand the source of a particular behavioral abnormality doesn't mean that it's just ingrained in the human species or anything like that. Also, we're not claiming that we can get rid of 100% of all crime or all, every form of behavioral distortion. The point is to build an environment that brings out the best of all human people and to reduce the negatives that our current system produces.
Questions, a webcast can't see you, so step out.
I would add to that in an environment that is as positive, at least intuitively positive, as what we're talking about, any aberrant behavior after that point, in almost every respect, would be a mental disorder, a medical issue. There is something going on up here, likely, that has triggered a misbehavior, and that's a medical thing that we can help people and learn from and try to figure out the human condition even better. I mean, we do a good job of sabotaging our own human condition as it is in this system. So, to get out of this system and then be able to look at bad behavior under a different set of circumstances will do nothing more than improve the awareness of ourselves. So for me, questions like that it's more of a medical thing. It would be helped. People would be psychologically and medically helped, but not like medically, here's this pill, but medically in a more scientific, traditional sense.
Just to kind of shatter the simplicity and absolutism of the question, even though it's been stated in a poetic sense, in the future system, there's no necessity for prisons and police. There's something I've termed the humanity factor, and that's this causal element. There's a chaos to human development, and to say you can weed out, either biologically or culturally, every type of offensive behavior is very difficult. It doesn't mean you can't reduce it to a fraction of a percent based on where we are now. So in James Gilligan, who's a tremendous thinker in violence, he makes the statement very clear. It's a public health issue if you have somebody who's so aberrated to remove them from society. It doesn't mean you're going to abuse them and punish them like we do in the structure of this arcane prison system we have today, but to remove someone, so to have an official authority, a public health official, who, if needs to use restraint on somebody who's completely out of control with a mental disorder, harming people, you remove them and you take care of them and figure out what happened. That isn't the same as prisons and police, but there's a function there that, with like any immune system, things can go wrong. Our system isn't perfect, so your body can develop problems. The immune system comes in. That's why the joke, the Zeitgeist movement, is the social immune system of the world. It relates to a different level to say that we're actually trying to get rid of all these other aberrancies to reduce all these problems because of this cancerous system in general. So I hope that makes sense. It's an absolutism that's really a fallacy, as Matt pointed out in his lecture.
And we shouldn't forget that some of these practices are already in place. If you go to Norway, you'll see that some prisons are actually rehabilitation centers where people work together, they kind of figure out what happened in their life, and they learn new skills and they get integrated in the community. So instead of, in most prisons, you get somebody who's virtually honest, or maybe they commit a very demeanor, like not much of a big deal, crime. Then he gets in and becomes a criminal, right? A real criminal, because he has to deal with that kind of pressure in the prison. In some countries more evolved, like Norway, this doesn't happen. So it's not like we're talking about something completely alien to what we're already experiencing. And also public officials should be proportional to the requirements for them. So the question, how would you deal with the rapist or in the future if you don't have a police? Well, you're going to have the proportional number of public officials to the crimes that you have. So you're never going to be out of public officials to take care of that situation, because it's an evolving process.
Who or what is the greatest challenge to be overcome for this reality to be achieved?
You just throw out some good ones, don't you?
I think definitely the human factor.
You want it, Jason? Sure.
Okay. So I see Stanton, the whole table come flying. It'd be great. So the question was, what is the greatest obstacle to overcome? Well, to answer that on a social level would be are the practices that are deteriorating our well-being. And that's a vague answer because it covers a lot of ground, from the environmental aspects to the social stressors, the biosocial stressors. You have the pollution inputs, the stress on your physiology. You also have the mental input, the stress on your mental states, say through debt, or from working in a structure where it's very basically like a private little dictatorship when you go to work and you punch in your time card. And so on a larger scale, overcoming those pressures, but that's only through identifying what the root cause is. If you think you're going to run out and fight every cause in the world, well, you'll never stop doing that while they all continue to be perpetuated. And so identifying the root cause and then overcoming those on a social scale. But then on a personal level, your greatest obstacle is you, in a way, because it depends on how you see this information. If the person who asked that question actually identifies with this train of thought that we've put forth today, then you're on your way to actually changing and updating your social value within the landscape around you. If everything we presented today is nonsense, then I don't know what to tell that person. It's just the greatest challenge is, I guess the pressure has not become high enough yet. It hasn't become bad enough yet to see the disparity between what we think works now and the outcomes that we're all living in.
Yeah, excellent points. And just to stem off of that, it's all about realizing your own power. Realizing. I mean, there's so many intelligent people in this audience right now. I'm continually impressed. I have a lot of chapter interaction with the movement here in Los Angeles, and there's so many intelligent people that I come across that, quite frankly, probably know more than I do about a lot of these subjects. And it's just about stepping into your own power and stepping into your own, doing something with that intelligence and channeling it and realizing, yeah, you can do public activism. I was never an activist before any of this stuff, but it's just, and I'm not totally comfortable doing this stuff yet. But it needs to happen. So it's really a lot about, what Jason said, values, what you value, what you do with your time, and committing to that and realizing that this is a long process, and just enjoy creating social change. I can't imagine, anything more fun than doing that. So.
And I'll touch on what Jason said a bit. I think sometimes a lot of people, even who do empathize with this direction, get discouraged because they witness a lot of apathy from other people. So, I mean, some people get very offended and argumentative and things like that, but I almost feel like it's worse if you just get no reaction at all, like, oh, sounds cool, whatever. It's like, this is kind of a big deal. But a lot of times I feel like most of it comes from the fact that people don't know. A lot of people don't know there's a solution. A lot of people don't know even what the root causes of the problems are. So that's how you run into that kind of apathy, and what you see around you, people are more preoccupied doing other things. I mean, I'm probably one of them. Obviously, I wasn't doing this my whole life. It wasn't until I really knew that there was a direction to work towards. So that, it's kind of the same thing with that obstacle being just getting the information out there so that people who become aware that there's somewhere to go from here start to move in that direction.
Is that it? Okay. How do we practically smart ourselves up after being so effectively dumbed down?
First of all, I want to congratulate you on the funniest question so far. That sort of ties in a little bit with what I was saying. Who here would say that most of their education these days comes from direct contact with the internet? Right? We get all our news from there. We learn about things like the Khan Academy from there and all the rest of it. We read our books, which are delivered by the internet. You're receiving news sources that can't go through a censor just through the structure of the way that this is set up. I do think that most of the education, and by the way, you know more than like Galileo did, right? You're geniuses compared to Galileo. Bear that in mind. this kind of stuff is sort of, I think education is sort of built in. Now, of course, there are a lot of people who can just use the internet for cat videos. But I think that that's changing. I do think that overall, as things are sort of shared more and that the sort of social engine pushes information outwards by people who deliberately want it to be shared, and as that becomes more of a social effort rather than just, hey, look at this cat video, then I think this sort of gradually tips the balance, almost like the tipping point you were talking about. So I would say it is definitely going to be systemic education, I'll put it that way, rather than just going to school. Even schools are changing now as well. I do think it's going to be the general interaction between the availability of information and the way that the interaction actually sends that information on as well. And especially our children right now. I mean, my daughter has already learned way more than I did and has come into contact with operating systems and concepts about the Earth and all the rest of it. Not through me being anywhere near a good parent, but just the fact that there is all this interactivity and availability of information and all the rest of it. So I don't know if that helps. We are Legion, indeed.
How can we break through or even compete or be heard in a world where secret societies, the Freemasonry elites, already have an iron grip, total control of every facet of our lives? How can we penetrate their iron grip?
There's no, it's unique because in a lot of circles since my first film came out, there was this new kind of thing that was never stated in the film but was presumed to be in the film, and that was this idea that there's a small group of really cool people that live under some mountain somewhere that control everything. And, you know, as convenient as that is to think about, and that's one of the criticisms I think I agree with the sort of anti-conspiracy theory cult out there that hates anything because they reduce it all to these simplistic terms. Excuse me, some people that live in a conspiratorial mindset can reduce things to a highly isolated and simplistic form of reasoning. And it is worthy of great criticism. I agree with that criticism. And that's where this is kind of born out of. There's no question that there have been secret societies. In fact, Scientology is by complete definition a secret society. Along with many other very prominent modern facilities, they operate the exact same way that these societies have operated. And there's no mystery to them. That's what I find so amusing. All they are small groups of really immature people that hoard knowledge, and they use immense power that they establish in one way or another for different purposes. And this goes back to the gang mentality, this tribalism that is really no different than a state, really no different than a corporation, except they think they're really, really cool because they have all this information and they've had it for a really long time. And that's really all they are, a bunch of immature kids. And the thing is, they're not actually in control of anything. What's in control is a mindset that they subscribe to, that everyone thinks is equally as cool. So the entire corporate facade of hoarding information, creating things through extreme restriction, is a secret society in its same mindset. There's no prominent way to describe this in a way that's relevant to the effect that I acknowledge the existence of these things, because even if they are in existence and in operation, it doesn't matter, because they have no real power than the elusive power we give to them in this sort of question that was just asked. So if you're actually, in other words, if you're an intelligent society looking at the train of thought, how can anyone stop you if you come together en masse? So it doesn't matter who these people are or who they were or where they came from. You just move forward with the train of thought.
We're talking about changing the planet, so to throw a time scale on it is erroneous, I think, on its face. But I look at it this way. I don't expect to see this happen in my lifetime. And I'm doing that to myself on purpose. All right? Think about it. If you're doing this for the selfish reason of I want it for me, why are you doing it? I'm doing it probably knowing that I'm not going to see it happen in my lifetime, and I'm doing it anyway.
I would just add to that that there is a value shift that can happen in more of a step-by-step sense. Obviously, the definition of a resource-based economy, and as what Eva said earlier, that we're always in transition. So planting the seeds of these values, which we're seeing anyway, almost forced by the environment, such as...
First question. How long would you imagine to set up a resource-based economy?
Go ahead. Mic on? Mic?
Test. How long will it take to get the microphone to work? Hello? Hello? There we go. All right. Why is that a loaded question? Of course,